Welcome to the Sonic Shaman Show, home of the Coffee Connect and Conscious Connections. The show is dedicated to empowering you to perceive, know, be, and express your unique voice in this world without the fear of judgment of others through healing, coaching, and educational services. In each episode, Hank and his guests offer tools, techniques, and inspiration to help you step into your potency. Now, here is your host, Hank Settler.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited today to have Tia Fagan on with us. She is a conscious parenting and authenticity coach. And if you don't have kids, that's okay, because the whole spin of today's conversation is how she can take the gifts that she uses for her clients and things and translate them to healing the inner child. Because all of us, we might not have kids, but we all were kids and we all could use some healing around that. But welcome to the show. I'm so excited to see where our conversation will take us.
I am so excited to be here. And I'm really glad you brought up that you don't have to have kids for this, because we were once kids, we have parents. And just because I do a lot of work with parents, I also work with non-parents, because the healing journey is one that we all need to take if we so choose to take that invitation.
Yeah. And every single year when I come up on my birthday, because I follow astrology, and astrology, there's this one concept called secondary progressions, where after your birthday, each day as the sun progresses, is you're in the energy of when you were one, you're in the energy of when you were two, you're in the energy of when you were three. So I just had my birthday March 13th, and every day I'm going through, spending at least 15 minutes. And it's amazing that as much work as I've done, like the little things that come up that seem so insignificant, but they were super significant. Because to a kid, that mountain looks a lot bigger than when you were an adult, or vice versa.
Exactly. I love that. I'm going to remember that for next year. I had my birthday March 7th, so I'm still in the frame. I'm going to do the math and see where I'm at age-wise.
Well, it's a great tool. But for those of you who might be catching our show for the first time, we welcome conversation. If you have a comment or a question, feel free to make that. Now, we are streaming to a lot of different locations. YouTube is a place I know I'm going to see the comments. If you're watching on Facebook, I may or may not. So if you're making a comment and I ignore you, I'm not doing it on purpose. Please head over to the YouTube channel. And if you're catching this on the podcast, on the replays, you can always catch the show live. If you want to subscribe to the YouTube channel, you'll get notices when we do our recordings. And then we upload this a little bit afterwards. But tell me, what brought you to the place of, because I always love getting into the story of us finding our unique medicine gift for the world and how we work with people. What brought you to the place where you were going to work with parents and conscious parenting?
Yeah, I mean, our stories are so important, aren't they? Especially because we have layers of conditioning from childhood. So we lose track of what our original purpose was at the time. So for me, I did what I was supposed to be told, right? I was a kid. I was the good girl. I took on that role very, very strongly. I went to school, got good grades, went to college, because that really wasn't even an option for me. Got married, had a good job. And then I got pregnant. As expected, because that was another thing on the to-do list you're supposed to do. And the plan was to have one kid, possibly two. Well, the universe had different plans for me. And halfway through the pregnancy, during a routine ultrasound back then, you did not have early ultrasounds unless there was a reason to. The ultrasound tech said, "You are having twins." And the rest of that appointment, I don't even remember, because I was very much wanting to control. I had my life planned, and these two little beings had different plans for me. And so that was the start of my journey. In hindsight, of course, I didn't see it at that time, that you have so much work and healing and growth to do. And these amazing daughters that I had are going to be the catalyst for that growth. And so as I was parenting them, being an engineer, was very much in my analytical brain, consuming parenting books, doing everything that I should do in parenting. If they do this, then you do that. And if that doesn't work, then you try this. But it never felt good in my soul. I was trying timeouts or this, and it's just like, but that doesn't feel good. And along the journey of parenting them, I came across Dr. Shefali Tsabary, who is one of the top conscious parenting. I think of her as the face of conscious parenting. And I read her book, The Conscious Parent, and it was what really rocked my world. I had been doing my own inner growth and healing work prior to that, but I wasn't intentionally putting it into my parenting. And once I read that, I realized that they are so my mirrors. They're mirroring back to me where I need to heal. This would happen. I'd get poked and I'd get reactive. And it's like, wait a minute, it's not about them. It's about me. What is showing up within me? And so that's how the journey started. And as I began to heal more using their mirrors back at me to really understand those shadows that I couldn't see. So they were showing me a lot of blind spots. The relationship grew, the foundation got stronger, connection became deeper. And in seeing that transformation in myself with my daughters, I knew I was actually during one of Dr. Shefali's. So I'm trained by her. I also have a certification prior to her opening up her institute, but I took all of her courses when she had them available. And during her teen course, it was like, this is my calling. I knew I wanted to do something to support people on their healing journey, but it was during the teen course. I'm like, I want to support parents because, right, we teach what we know, what we live, what we experience.
Yep, and I found the book. I just posted a link in the comments to Amazon, The Conscious Parent. So if you do want to pick it up, the link, if you buy it from the link I posted, it will help support this stream. It's part of our affiliate link program. Great. But that definitely, I'm probably going to be ordering that too. And it's available on Kindle. It's available on audiobook. There's plenty of ways that you can consume that. Now, what was it about her specifically? Because I mean, there's a lot of conscious parenting books out there. Was there something in particular that drew you to this one particular author?
Yeah, I think for me, it was she just dove right in. I mean, she didn't mince words. It's you. Yep. Your child is just being themselves. And we are either going to add our conditioning onto them from generational patterns, or we're going to make that choice to take ownership of our own part in that story. And just recognizing, connection before correction.
Now, I believe that Carl Jung, I believe, pretty sure it's Carl Jung. I was remembering something that Bruce Campbell had put on about with mythos and the way that the human mind works, that kids or no kids, the shadow in your other than conscious or subconscious reflects out into the world that shows up for you. Now, with a wife and kids, you have a very consistent people to throw your stuff back at you. But for people who don't have a wife or don't have kids, how might that play out more in their day-to-day life? And reflect that inner child and just family, friends, colleagues, and that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, exactly that. Oftentimes, if we see something in another that we are judging or criticizing, it's because it's within us. So whenever we notice a judgment, whenever we notice we are pointing the finger at the other, that's usually a time to reflect and notice, what am I projecting? How is that showing up in me? If you're saying that person is such a victim, they're just blame everyone. And it's like, okay, so how are you a victim? So how can you turn that question around of noticing in the other, how do you look at yourself? So it can be with friends, coworkers. It can even be a passing moment with someone else as you're driving. Someone speeds past you. Well, how many times do you speed past someone else? I mean, even little things like that. Are you trying to get ahead? What is going on? So it's entering curiosity. So anytime you're activated, that's a moment to recognize, ooh, my inner child is coming up. There's something here that's being poked at because I'm having a reaction. Because if we're just having a response, we're not getting activated in our inner child.
Now, that reminds me, for those of you who don't know, I've been sober now 15 years. And I remember one of the old timers when there was somebody in the program that they didn't think they had any character defects. And so the sponsor had them get a notebook and said, well, I want you to go. But a lot of people in the meeting rooms annoyed them. That was the key thing. He's like, well, I want you to get a notebook. I don't want you to go to all these meetings. I want you to write down everything you don't like about those SOBs. Yeah. And so he went through it and he had pages and pages well, now you have your list of character defects.
Exactly.
Because he was saying everything you notice that you don't like, it's a mirror. And so just the same dance, a little bit of a different tune. I learned that in AA, but it's all different ways to come about the same information.
Exactly. And, you can even do that work with animals too. I mean, horses are a beautiful mirroring animal that they reflect back to you where you need to heal. And you can even say, if you watch, you could watch the squirrels climbing up the tree and you're going to label one of those squirrels as being more aggressive or what that is. So it doesn't even have to be a human that you're putting those labels on. It can be animals, your dog, if you have several dogs, you know, sometimes we say this dog is that dog is that, you know, so there's so many opportunities if we just open up our mind and say, what do I have to learn in this moment?
Now that's one huge thing, just becoming aware when things stick you. Now, what are about like without the story I just told, even though they didn't know it, they were kind of proactively making a list before they were being triggered. But what about for people who realize, yeah, I have a lot of healing work to do as an inner child, and rather than wait for all this stuff to show up, let me go and tackle it head on. Is there any processes or go-to things that you recommend for people to kind of dive in and get to a lot of that stuff sooner versus just as it trickles in from experience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously experience is often one of our best teachers because it's something we are actually having a moment, having a body experience. But one way you can really tap into that inner child is just simply writing. Think of a time of your life that was really hard, you know, maybe adolescence, middle school, maybe you have a really vivid memory of being 5 years old and let's say you went to the neighbors and you picked the tulips and you were so excited to give them to your mom and your mom got upset. You didn't understand that as a child, but you had a feeling, you know, you were rejected. I did something wrong. So if you can think of a time period when you felt something negative, right? I don't think of things as negative or positive. They're just experiences, but they give us insight into that healing. And then you can write a letter to yourself at that age of what you needed to hear. How do you wish your parent had responded to you in that moment? What did you need most? And that can give us that insight into reparenting ourselves. Because ultimately, we don't always have to know exactly what the situation was, but we need to know how it made us feel. And then that's communicating a need. And as we write that letter back, we recognize, oh, I needed to be seen. I needed to be heard. I needed to be recognized and felt that I was good enough no matter what. And so when we write that letter to ourselves, it's helping heal just a little bit more and a little bit more.
You know, I love that you said that you don't necessarily have to remember it, because I've had things come up where I know there's an energy from around a certain age, but I don't know what happened. But like the Western mind, like loves to dissect, like, especially I'm sure you being an engineer, you like, but probably is like, well, I have to know what I'm getting rid of first. Right. So like, how does one trick the mind? Like, well, sometimes I do with my sessions, I'll call it like a storytelling session. Well, tell a story. This is what it feels like. Well, what did happen? It doesn't matter if it's true or not. Let's put a framework around it. Do you have any go-to little processes that help people like that? And then before that, I also have to share with you, because you said that tulip story. There was this one teacher in 6th grade. Like I'm so glad I didn't have her, but you know how you have specials and you had to switch classrooms sometimes as kids. And she was just like one of the most mean people ever. And so as a kid and being just, you know, wanting people to be happy and things like that, one time at recess, I picked all these flowers for her and I brought them at the special, and then I got in trouble. I don't know if they called it detention, but she was allergic to flowers. So, but here I am doing something kind, and then I get punished and reprimanded. Then after that, like every time I handed an assignment, oh, it's too messy, you have to redo it. So there was like almost like this vindication element that came out to it too, all from me having an awareness of her pain, looking to create something different, but not being skilled at all, you know, at that point in my life. But that was like just resonated with me. And it wasn't even a parent, which is why I wanted to pull that up. Like, it's not just parenting things that stick us. It could have been something like that. That was 6th grade. And that's something that in my last soul of return, when I was going through all the days after my birthday, that was one of the things that came up. I'm like, whoa, that's really, you know, that probably didn't seem so big now, but then it was huge. But
exactly.
But how do you work with people to like frame the energies so that they can just move them through and not necessarily, you know, go into the trauma and drama in terms of a memory?
Yeah, no. And I love that you just shared that story. And it just reminds me too of that we just have to honor those memories. And it isn't always our parents. It can be school counselors, teachers, it's culture. I mean, we're so indoctrinated by so many messages that we have to live up to, or we're not this or that. So one way to help people do that, writing your story is something I do, and I facilitate circles. Not so much in person right now with COVID, but I'm hoping to have them live again. But in that process of our 8 months together, people write their story around some area that is a wound within them, something that activates them. And when you write that story, and you tell your story in a safe environment where you're held and seen, there's so much healing that happens. So it's not just writing our story, it's sharing it with people who you know can hold that space. And then the other part would be, if you don't have that memory, because we don't always have, like we said, we don't even have to always have that, but it resonates and it sticks in our body. So our body is always talking to us. So I often invite people to do a simple body scan and do that, even do it every day for 21 days or however long they feel, and notice, where are you holding tension? Where do you feel constricted? Is it feeling cool in another area? And as we start to tap in and reconnect with their body, because so many people aren't connected to their bodies, that really can be healing, because then we can allow that energy. So they can even, and ask them to describe it. What does it feel like? What color is it? And the more we can kind of, the needing, because we have to balance our head and our heart, right? And our spirit. If we're always up here, we miss a lot. And if we're always here, we do live in a world of form. So we have to have some understanding there. So if we can even taste it, look at those senses. What does this energy feel like? And then we can nurture it, hold it with kindness and compassion, and release it. And so even you can do a grounding exercise, where you take the earth energy and then you release it into the earth energy. So you have that infinite loop of the earth, healing earth energy, and then you release that energy that's stuck in you. And you just imagine it, and just the intention of that. And you can really, once you practice grounding, and I do encourage people to ground every morning. It's a beautiful way to start your day, to take up that earth energy and release anything that needs to be released. And you can tap it throughout the day. So if you notice, ooh, I'm feeling sticky in my heart space. What is that? How does it feel? I just feel constricted and in. So how can we expand and feel lighter? And now let's release it down. And you can feel the energy going through your body. And that's how it stays stuck, because we don't feel. And honor and just say, this is just a feeling. And I'm not going to attach stories to it. I'm just going to allow and release.
There's a technique in the type of shamanism I practice, which is the Paco Kuna tradition of Peru. It's called Mama Nuknu, which means mother's milk. And it's a technique where I call it, in English, I would translate it to empath dialysis, because you basically bring the energy of the earth into one foot, allow it to go through, and know that the flavor milk, whatever she's going to give you, is going to be exactly what you need in order to let go of things. And the trick is that as you start to flow the energy from second to second, the energy can shift and change, because what is going to nurture you the most is changed as you start to receive. And you just allow that to go through the totality of your body and being, and beyond all aspects of you, all lifetimes, if you believe in lifetimes, all that stuff, and then out the other foot. So you create that loop of energy. So it's just a South American spin on it, but I thought it was so fitting to what you had mentioned. And then my question to follow up with that is, people resist, myself included, resist writing.
Yes.
And so like people love, but I know from my own experience, like there is a super important thing, like of actually taking the time to write out your story, or taking the time to write out what you're looking to manifest, or taking the time to write out your targets. I don't like the word goal. Targets.
I don't either.
Yeah.
It's a negative connotation, because you've already failed. You haven't met it.
Yeah, well, a whole nother reason in access is because when you're in like sports, when you hit the goal, what happens? All the energy shifts the other way, where in targets, you just keep putting the target and moving it as you need to change.
Love it.
But anyway, we could do a whole stream on that probably. But could you speak a little bit to like when people have this resistance of like wanting to not write things down? Like how do you, because I'm one of those people, so I could use this inspiration too. Like how do you motivate people to actually take the time to write and put a little bit more form to those thoughts and those ideas and that story?
Yeah, no, it's great, because I also was very resistant to writing. I resisted it for so long, and I kept having teachers, early on in my journey, journal. And I'd take the paper and I'd, start writing. I'm like, I don't know what to write. And I noticed that I'd be critical. It was because it wasn't going to be good enough. Maybe there's a perfectionism piece that's coming into play, or that fear that someone might find it and read it and it's private and you don't want that to happen. So first I kind of dive in with whoever I'm working with and see what is the resistance. Where is it coming from? Because if we don't even know what it is or where it's coming from, how can we incorporate and integrate that? So perfectionism, worry about other people reading it, whatever that may be. So once we kind of get a flavor around that, then it's an invitation. It's not a to-do, because when it's a to-do, the energy behind it is different. Like, oh, I just got to get it done. She said I need to do it. I'm going to do it. No, I invite you. So anytime I work with someone, I always give them explorations rather than homework, just because it's a different feel. And it also helps them tap in, what do I need today? And if they're not still writing, I still encourage and guide and say, just write 3 sentences. Or another way I encourage people to start writing is with automatic writing prompts. So I give them a prompt, because sometimes they don't know where to start. And so I give a prompt, even something just as simple as, I need ... So you write, I need, complete the sentence. And if they can't complete it, I say, you just write I need until you have a whole sheet of paper that just says I need, and then try again tomorrow. Because the minute you put pen to paper, eventually something will come within you. So it's practice. It's just a practice. And some people do better in the morning. Some people do better at night, maybe on a lunch break, whatever it is. Play around with different times. Even I don't have one right here, get a small journal, a pocket journal, that's this big. So it doesn't feel so daunting to see an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So just kind of playing with it, get different colors, try writing outside. I mean, there's so many different ways to twist it a little bit. You can even, it's writing, but it's not writing. You could get a stick and go to a beach right there, and then if people are afraid of it writing, it gets washed away. You can do it. Or I'll encourage people to, if they have a fire, burn it, shred it up, bury it in the garbage, put some stuff on top of it. So there's ways to work through it. And then being gentle when you don't journal that day. Because sometimes we're just exhausted. And if our body is saying rest, not journal, let's honor the rest and give ourselves permission to just feel.
That reminds me of something I wanted to go back to before I forget, for people who want to connect, because sometimes I get so ingrained in the conversation, I forget to say, hey, if you want to find out more about Tia, you can go to her website, which is tiafagan.com, or you could just email her if you don't like websites. You can go to tiafagancoach@gmail.com, and then on Instagram and Facebook, it's both @TinaFaganCoach. And you also have a Clubhouse channel.
I do.
Which I know a lot of people, I finally just got into Clubhouse. I found someone with an invitation. So I finally got in, but that's something on the Apple market, which is all just audio things for people who might not know about Clubhouse. But let me, if you want to give us that, and then I know you have your YouTube channel. It's probably all linked on your website.
It is. So Clubhouse is just Tia Fagan, no coach at the end. Yes, okay. I'll find you on Clubhouse when we get done.
Okay, sounds good. I did figure out a way I can stream Clubhouse to this, like how we're doing it now. But if I have a guest on Clubhouse and they're on how you are, then people can't hear the guest. So I have to figure out some way to work around that. But that's kind of a whole nother level that we can play around with that. So
fun.
But what I wanted to go back to, when we talked about body scanning, for me as a Reiki practitioner and an energy healer, that has one meaning to me. But for somebody that's listening, that they're body scan, what does that mean? That aren't sensitive to energies at all. How would you describe exactly a body scan, and how would one go about starting to enter into that practice to figure out what the body's feeling like?
Yeah. So an easy way to do it, I often, I have a course that I've put together with my co-host of our Mask Off podcast, and it's called Balancing Your Backpack. So it's 21 days of body, mind, and spirit. So the first week is body, second week is mind, last week is spirit. And it's just little tiny, small self-care practices. And in that, and that's free, so anyone's welcome to log in and access that on Teachable. In that, there are 2 body scan meditation audios. So it's sometimes when you're just getting started, it's helpful to have someone to guide you through it. Because if it's all new, it's we get so in our head, am I doing this right? I'm not feeling anything. And we can easily slip into judgment. So Kim recorded one, and I also recorded one. And it just is an invitation. So you just simply, I encourage people to lay down often for their first time, because then you're not this chair is uncomfortable, or you're less wiggly when you're laying down often. And just inviting you to notice your head. You start here, and then you just slowly go down. Even What are my eyebrows, right? We furrow our forehead, we furrow our eyebrows, we get that little thing, or we tighten our jaw. And so there's just little prompts through it. Like, what do you notice? Could you soften just a little bit more? So it's just starting to learn to tap into different parts of your body, noticing, can you just soften a little bit more? And then as you practice over and over, it's going to start to become much more clear because you're more connected to your body. Oh, okay, I'm feeling a lot in my sacral chakra. I need to just like, what do I need to do to help release something there? What else is going on? And it gives us those clues to what we were talking about earlier. You know, instead of having to have an experience to notice where we're getting poked, our body can tell us. And so we can kind of tap into that a little bit more. But often I have people start with that audio, guided audio, because it helps to start.
Now, I'm on your website now because I wanted to make sure that we have that. I can just put the link in for that one specifically, and I'm under courses. Is that, but you mentioned Teachable. Is that on a different website, the 21-day thing that you're talking about?
Yeah, so on my website, I'll take you to an external link on Teachable.
Okay, so just if you go to her website and go to courses, any of the courses is going to take you over to Teachable, and then you'll find the course that you were talking about. Oh, here we go, Body, Mind, Spirit. So you can sign up. In fact, now I have the link. So Balancing Your Backpack, is that it?
Yeah, and that one's free, so anyone can access it. We ran it live the first time, and now it's just evergreen, so anyone can. But you can still join the Facebook group and see any of the stuff that was occurring during the lives as well.
So I'm posting a link in the comments, and I will update. If you're listening to the podcast, I will update the description of that, and you'll find it there if you want to check that out. I love that. I'm using Thinkific, but I have a thing that I have launching as it's going to be a free course also, but I call it As I Forgive Me.
Ooh,
and it's an acronym for a metaphysical approach to inner work. So kind of modeled a little bit after the 12 steps, but it's nothing to do with addiction, because I find that even though that work is so golden, people, as soon as they hear 12-step work or big book or anything like that, oh, I'm not an addict. I'm not. Right. But it's like a lot of great tools. So I wanted to take the stigma out of it and be able to offer people like a way to start diving in and really getting into all that.
Oh, what a great gift you're giving people. That's so needed.
Now, and a reminder, because I know it's a quiet group. Of course, one of the things is I'm very inconsistent when I stream. It's just like, oh, here's a stream, and it's like all different times of day and everything. And the podcast is very consistent. But I want to remind folks, if you're watching on Facebook, because we're going to like 12 different locations right now, if you want to make a comment and you have been, and I'm not responding, you might be in one of the destinations that don't roll into the studio. So if you hop over to the YouTube channel or the Sonic Shaman Facebook page, I know that I'm going to see the comments there, but we definitely are not ignoring it. But if you have questions, comments, we're happy to dive down any rabbit hole that you would like. Could you tell us, what about a time where you had a real challenging situation, and like what tools do you use to really break through the hardest of cases? Well, I already know probably one of the things you're going to say, because it sounds like you've been trained in NLP, some of the verbiage you're using. Maybe. Or maybe it's just coincidental because of the similar vocabulary. But what's your go-to things for really tough cases? Because I'm sure that what works for really tough people will probably work for everyday people too.
Yeah, I mean, it's all individual, right? So I can just speak generally, and I'll just give an example of an experience that I personally had as I was continuing and learning and practicing this work, which is lifetime. It doesn't stop, right? Because we're still always going to have moments where something we think we have healed, it still comes up, right? Because it comes up in a different way. But one experience I had was when my daughters were in middle school. So they're 20 now. I have twin daughters, as I mentioned earlier, and how they changed my world, and in a good way. So during middle school, right, it's a time of trying to find out who they are. It's really starting to bring on that autonomy, and big emotions really show up again. Not that they don't before, but in a different way. And at night, that was often when times would get opened up, wanting to talk, share things that happened in the day. And because I was processing out of my own wounds, my own inner child stuff, I would get activated when they were feeling those big feelings, and I would want to, my old pattern was to go in and fix and try to make it better so they felt better, because then I would feel better. But the reality is that's not what they needed. And what they needed was me to hold space, which to me is one of the most powerful gifts you can give your children and yourself and anyone else in this world. And so my daughter, this is just one example. She came in one night and she was just sharing, and the pain was palpable. You could just feel how much she was struggling, which of course activated within me all my pain of what it was like to be in 7th grade. And so I was reliving it through her, but she didn't need that. She didn't need that energy. She needed me to just hold that space. And I would just lay in this bed, because it would be night, dark, and lay there and listen to her. And I just would go on my breath, and I would feel the constriction in my heart. I would just feel that tightness, and I'd soften a little more and just breathe. Just breathe. And I kept reminding myself, don't open your mouth. Don't say a word. Breathe. Just breathe. Don't open. Feel. Because what it was because I couldn't handle my own feelings, because it was so hard for me. So I wanted to fix her, but she just needed me to hold that space. And one time one evening, I opened my mouth to try to give her a suggestion, and she just stopped what she was saying and left the room. I couldn't get any clearer than that. And I am so grateful for her, because 5 minutes later she came back in. So she gave me a second chance, and I just held that space, and she found the answers for herself. And action. So what are the tools? Going on your breath, tapping into your body, feeling what you need to feel. So you can still be present for the other, but first and foremost, you have to be present for yourself. Because if we're not present for ourselves, how are we able to move through and help another if we're all discombobulated inside?
And from a metaphysical perspective, like if you kind of buy in, I'm going to use the words like if you buy in or validate somebody's story with like things of your own, like have you ever seen people who are competing about who has it worse in life, and they're like kind of validating each other's story? Yes. Like that's the difference between holding space and like pouring another layer of cement on the trauma. Right. In a lot of ways, because instead of giving them an opportunity to experience something different, you're just layering on, well, here's all my crap too.
Exactly.
You know, it's a whole, that's a wonderful thing. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention when we talk about being present in the body. The breath is huge. Like every single tradition I've ever practiced, from Reiki to shamanism, everything has always incorporated some element of breath work or mindfulness breathing. Right. Which is super important. And I want to post a link too for people who also struggle with the body thing. I have a video on my, it's an access consciousness technique called the Thymus Exercise. I say the thymus is a seat of the soul, and it's a 6-part energy flow that helps to activate the seat of the soul, so the body and the being, which are two separate things, can become congruent and have more communion with one another, because that's a huge thing. Like we're taught, like, at least for me, like I always took the body for granted, and like they're, we're fighting against each other or whatever. But like when you really have a communion, things just become easier. Diet becomes easier. Clothes choice just changes. It's really crazy. But I'll go ahead and post a link to that as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a real vulnerable story.
It is really, there's so much magic in that space though, once you learn how to do that. And it gives your children or the other person you're holding space for permission to feel. Because so many times we don't allow the other to feel. Because like you said, I'm going to one-up you. I'm going to share my story with you. But no one's feeling what needs to be felt. We're just layering on top and shoving it down by staying there versus going within.
Now, do you have parents? Well, for myself, for example, I had a sibling who really gave my parents a run for the money. Like when there might be like one of the siblings that is just like crazy off the hook, has a lot of problems, we'll just say generally. How do you work with, what does one do in situations where there's something really extreme like that? And I can talk offline. In my case, my parents are watching. I don't want to traumatize them by saying something online. Yeah. But needless to say, I gave everybody a run for their money. Like when there's something like that going on, what tools to try to shift something? And nowadays, there's so many more tools than when I was growing up that are available. I think it's a whole different world. But what does one do when it's like a real problem child? And, even though it's all about you, but at the same time, there's like this huge elephant in the room with a certain individual.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm always going to say, it's first turn the spotlight on yourself, because you have to work and heal. And so you're not so activated and triggered by the others, that child's behavior. And I don't believe that there are good children or bad children. I just believe each child wants to be seen and heard, and they fall into the pattern. So they are seen, even if it's in that negative light. And remembering behavior is communication of an unmet need, first and foremost. And obviously there are situations, where you need outside help. If there's suicidal thoughts, self-harm, anything like that, you want to make sure you get a professional involved. But as far as the child who is acting out more, has bigger feelings, may be the more, quote, dominant sibling, I don't know if you were the one that got picked on or whatever it is, you don't need to share, as we talked about, because you want to honor that. Mm-hmm. But recognizing, so first notice what's coming up within, and then, so there's a couple things, getting curious. What is this child's behavior trying to tell me? And so there's an image of the iceberg. You see that going around for, the anger iceberg, there's a racism iceberg. There's all these different icebergs. So there's a parenting iceberg by Kelly Bartlett that's really beautiful. And so you see the tip of the iceberg, that's the behavior. But what's underneath? What could the questions the child be asking you for help for? But they don't know how to verbalize it. Or they have been ignored when they have asked, so they don't ask anymore. But inside they still have that unmet need. And so we want to be curious to see, are there some needs that we need to meet? And not just food, the basics, right? Sleepy, tired, hungry, those types of things. But what else could be going on? Sometimes something happens at school we don't know about with their best friend who just told them something terrible and hurt them. And then they come home and take it out on someone else. But you don't even know about what may have happened with someone else at school. So there's recognizing there's more to the situation than just what you're seeing in this moment. And I use that example of, if you're feeling super stressed at work, pre-COVID, and you were driving home, you got stuck in a traffic jam, and it was just one thing after another. Then you walk in the door and the kids are all on top of you, and you have to make dinner and get all this done. And you just are like, I can't take it anymore. And you get angry or have some reaction. It's not about what happened in the moment. It was the compilation of things throughout the day. So with that child, first I'd get curious. What else could be going on? What are some unmet needs? And then helping parents really identify, what are their boundaries? And are they actually holding boundaries? Are they creating boundaries from love, or are they creating boundaries from fear and control? So I work with parents to really identify, what boundaries does your child need right now? What conditions do you need to create for your child to rise up instead of feeling pushed down and controlled? Because oftentimes there's either too many boundaries or there's no boundaries at all. Or the boundaries are coming from fear and control. And then recognizing boundaries are fluid. And how can you dance with your child within those boundaries? Because there's very few boundaries that are set in stone. Safety boundaries and stuff, yes. Yet, most boundaries we're willing to have some flexibility. So how can you incorporate the child into those boundaries? But then ultimately, how do you hold the boundary with love, with compassion? Because we all thrive knowing we're held. And if we can look at boundaries, not rules. I'm not a rule person, and it's not, you've crossed that boundary, you're going to be punished. No, that's not what I'm talking here. I am talking about loving, compassionate boundaries for your highest good, the child's highest good, and for mine as well. Because that also teaches them that too, right? Mm-hmm. Because if we are never met with loving, compassionate boundaries, because I think of them as, I do this because I am not out of using the term love incorrectly. I love myself enough to create this boundary, and I love you enough because I know you can rise and create that boundary, inner boundary, a boundary within yourself. So I won't even need to have a boundary.
I love that. Now, shifting it a little bit to people who don't have kids or the family life, and it's more manifesting out in their workspace and their colleagues and things. Is it the same kind of tools and conversation? Because at home you're stuck with them all the time, and it has one vibe. But at work, well, who am I to be doing that? I'm not the boss. So, but it's really important to still honor yourself. So, what are the tools in a work situation, or a friend situation, or a church situation, or whatever social situation people find themselves into where they have something coming up like that?
So I think it's important for people to recognize, what are your patterns? I call them masks. What masks are you wearing? Are you a people pleaser? Are you the fixer? Are you the doer? Especially at work, right? Because maybe we're like, well, if I don't do this, then I'm not going to be respected. Or if I stand up, I might get fired, so what else? So I'm just going to do. And what boundaries do you need to take in place? Because I can speak from my own personal experience. Back when I was an engineer, my first job, I worked hours. I was back during air quality. Title V was brand new. So we had clients we had these deadlines that had to get done. I would be there till midnight, over and over and over, had no boundaries. And then when I left that job, went to another job, I very specifically made it a point. I will work late when I need to, but I'm not going to stay late just to stay late. So I created that boundary. So same thing. What boundaries do you need to create at work? Is there someone who is constantly taking from you and taking advantage of your willingness to do that work for them, but then they take the credit, and then you start to feel resentment. So what within you needs to rise up, and where do you need to speak your truth? And it's not easy, and it takes time and a process. And then who can you go to? So identifying, what are my boundaries? What do I need to do? What's right for me? And then having that conversation, hopefully with the person that you're having a conflict with, where you can have, this is what I need, what do you need? And then you can find a new balance that works for everyone. Because it's not about changing the other, because we can't. We can only change ourselves. But we can have conversations to collaborate together and see each other where they're at.
And a great way to, because I find that when those situations happen, oftentimes it is resonating something from childhood too.
Definitely.
And an NLP technique would be, when have I felt like this before? And you start, or all the times I felt taken advantage of, and you start to like deal in and dive into those layers of energy. Well, I don't like calling them layers either. In Access, we call it a nucleated sphere. So instead of peeling layers of an onion, which never go anywhere, it's more like a kid's bubble pipe. And like the original wound is over here blowing air in, and all these bubbles are coming out. And you pop a bubble, another one fills in. You pop a bubble, another one fills in, because the problem is this inner child wound way over here that you don't even remember.
Right. Exactly. I love that image.
Yeah. But you always are talking about become curious, and to become curious and Access, it's all about asking questions. When have I felt like this before? What's right about this I'm not getting? Where did this originally stick me? Whatever question you want to start asking, to start, diving, taking the plunge and really getting in there. But then we have this thing called the ego. And the ego, I like to have the acronym is edging God out. It's like it only knows past data. It only knows its goal is for you to survive, and it would rather you pick the same miserable thing because it knows you survived it than dive into a different possibility and choose differently. So how does one start to shift the ego, not to be afraid of looking at that stuff? Because I think that's one of the bigger resistances that people have to starting to make change and set boundaries, because the ego is like, we don't know what's going to happen if we do that.
Right. And recognizing that is, a physiological response, so rather than resisting that resistance from the ego, I think of it as, it might just be sitting here. Oh, you don't want to do that. That's really scary. We don't want to go there. And you just say, I know it's scary. I know it's hard, with all the other work that you've done before as well. And just say, I'm going to try it this time, and we're going to do this together. So we're not trying to push it away. I think sometimes when we try to push and shove things away with that energy, it's just going to push right back. So let's think of an invitation. I hear what you're saying. Thank you for the reminder. You served me before. I appreciate everything you have done for me, but today I'm going to make a different choice, and I'm going to try it. So it's not, when we have that push and pull energy, it's kind of the same thing when we start to ask those questions. Are we asking those questions from having to have the right answer? Or are we asking the questions from, oh, I just kind of want to understand, versus I need to know the answer? Is a very different energy. Same thing with that pushing the ego away. No, you've served me. Thank you. And so it's the both and the and. I'm very much a both and person. We can still have our ego. It's just our ego isn't driving the bus anymore, per se.
Yeah. And what you just described too is the art of allowance, because if a rule of duality is that for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So anything you're fighting, you're just lending energy to the opposing force, but just letting it be. Right. That's the art of allowance. And then in that space, there's none of this. You just have space where you can choose differently. And it's like, really, it is an art. It doesn't necessarily come easy for people, but if you start becoming curious, to use your vocabulary, it really starts to shift the ability to step into that realm. And a reminder again, folks, I can't believe with as many people as I've seen that nobody has a question. You must be covering it all. They're like, well, we have no questions. She is covering everything we've ever wanted to know about everything. But seriously, if you have a question about what we've been talking about anything at all, about a personal situation, now's the time. We got about 10 minutes left in our conversation. So just an invitation for all of you to become curious and ask a question or make a comment if you like. And if not, that's cool. And do it on the YouTube channel. If you're making comments and I'm not responding, head over to YouTube and do it there, and we'll make sure we get to them. And as a reminder, if you want to connect with Tia, her website is tiafagan.com. Go back through the comments. If you came in a little bit late, I posted a link to like a 21-day free boot camp of sorts for the body, mind, spirit, getting centered. So definitely check that out. That was like, she wasn't even planning to talk about that. It just came up in the conversation. And then on Facebook and Instagram, Tia Fagan Coach. And then you could email her, tiafagancoach@gmail.com. Also on Clubhouse and YouTube, which you can find on her website. But what's the Clubhouse one more time for the people who
just Tia Fagan.
Tia Fagan.
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. So what have we not talked about yet? Like all the things you feel could be the most impactful, most enriching for people to know about. What haven't we talked about yet that you think could just change everybody's world?
I think one thing that's just coming to mind right now would be, just because it kind of ties into what we were just talking about, having that choice, right? Is recognizing we have a choice in every moment. And so that first step is being an acceptance of the isness of what is happening right now. And I'll use a parenting example just for simplicity, and we can bring in other examples if you have one. But your toddler's having a temper tantrum, full blown out meltdown, and for some parents that is really activating at times. Other times you can meet that child with complete compassion and support, right? It just depends about our balance inside. But so that temper tantrum is happening, or you have a teenager and they literally just said, I hate you, flipped you the bird, and slammed their door, right? Because it's going to happen sometime. Not everyone, but most parents experience some shape of that at some point. And so we enter isness. This is what happened. Doesn't mean you like it. Doesn't mean that you love that your teenager just did that to you, or your toddler is having the 13th temper tantrum today. But that is what is happening right now. And when we aren't resisting what's happening in front of us, then we can really make that conscious choice. What's the next step? What's the next little step I can take to connect with this situation? So that's connecting to self. Going on your breath is always helpful. I do have other people find ways to create other pauses, because sometimes people just can't access the breath right away, or they need to move their bodies, or whatever that may be for an individual. And then you have the choice, right? So it's that path I'm going to take this path that feels scary and different, or I'm going to go down the old pattern that my mom did, that my grandmother did, that my grandfather did, and great-grandfather, and just goes down the line. So we have that opportunity to break those generational patterns, heal within. But the first step really is moving into that acceptance of what is happening in front of you. Because if it's raining, it's raining. It's not raining to make us mad.
Right. Well, it's, I like to say that it is being in creationship with things is what could I create with what is happening around with me. But if you're in relationship, that's like more of a duality thing. And then that's the difference between life happening to you instead of through you. Exactly. And to the degree that you can be in allowance of what's happening, it gives you way more power and potency to change things. And Mary Lee, she's one of my colleagues. She's also a healer. She's gone through the apprenticeship that I've done for the Paco tradition of South America, which, shameless plug, it's one starting in May. So if you want to find out more, calloftheshaman.com. You can find out about the next 9-month apprenticeship. Mary Lee's already signed up. She's going to be in it.
That's great.
But she put in, living with parents appears to be many client issues. And she already knew I was going to ask her a question to clarify, because she posted a second thing. Yeah. And she's talking about adults living with parents. And so have you had, because that's, we're all thinking about, adults and little kids, but what about situations where as an old adult, you now have to go back and be in the parents? I think it is really an amazing opportunity to heal a lot of those wounds if you can go into the right space, but it could be a little bit traumatic for people having to go back and live at home. What are your insights around situations like that?
Yeah, I mean, we could go both ways. We could be, the young adults or middle-aged adults living with their parents, either as a caretaker or just on life situations, they're coming back home. So I'll take the adults returning to home, not being the caretaker at this point. But if that's more what she's asking, we can go there too. But it's an opportunity to heal, because oftentimes we can handle our parents in little doses because we get reactivated and often go to our teenage self or our 7-year-old self or wherever we are feeling that poke at our inner child. And recognizing that we have the ability to create those boundaries with our parents that we may not have created back then. So it's accepting what is happening. Okay, I notice when my mom says this, I have this sensation in my body. Okay, what is that? How can I think of what that was from before? Or when she says this, you hear this all the time. When my mom says this, I feel like I'm 13 years old again. So recognizing, and again, coming back together, collaborating. Okay, I am now an adult. Yes, I'm living in your home. And I still need my own ability to make my own choices. What do you need from me? And then vice versa. What do I need from them? So coming together, having those difficult conversations, because they may be difficult because you may never have had a conversation like that with your parents, but also you may not be able to because they may get activated because they haven't healed their inner child. So recognizing how much can you show up and they can show up and you can see and hear each other. Because if you're looking to them to be on the same journey that you're at, it's likely not the case. And so remembering I can only control myself, I can't control them. But what I can do are create those healthy boundaries that keep my inner landscape secure and safe, and know that, okay, I'm not going to take this personally from them. I realize I feel like I'm 13 years old again. What do I need to heal? Because it's an amazing opportunity to really heal, but it's not easy because there's nothing like being re-triggered by your parents again.
Well, and I would go into the question then access consciousness, which is one of, like, I've practiced shamanism, and then access consciousness, which is like the oldest tradition and one of the most modern ones, and I blend them together. But they would say then, what energy, space, consciousness, and choice could my body, being and beyond be to create a different possibility around this with ease? And when they ask questions, they're not looking for answers. They're literally looking for this energy to come up. And this is the energy that would allow you to be in the space that might create, instead of this, the opportunity for them to choose differently. And then the second follow-up question to that would be, at every place where I'm not allowing myself to be that, I'm willing to destroy and uncreate it. So it's identifying the energy to step into, the energy that's holding you back, and that creates wonders. It still might not be easy, but it can create a lot more ease if it's about what you're being while you're making the choices you're making. Because one is the energy of responding, and the other is the energy of reacting. And if you go into it reacting, you're only doing this and creating a lot more headaches for yourself unnecessarily.
Right. And you're reliving the same situation in the present moment that you lived from before, because that's what you knew. That was the interaction. So creating that possibility that it can be different, and honoring that space within that I can respond differently. And they may not like it. They may not respond the way I want them to, but that's okay, because I know I am feeling in alignment in my body, mind, and spirit right now. And it's my truth for me right now. And I'm not intentionally harming. I'm not intentionally creating disconnect. I'm actually doing the opposite. I'm inviting, but they have to choose to take that invitation. But if you're still coming from that heart space, it feels different within.
Right. And I took a volunteer class once when I started to volunteer for hospice. I sat vigil, and I also did like healing ceremonies for people who were ready nearing transition. And the one facilitator, she went to the class and she said, like, I love you, like 20 different ways. In some ways it was like sarcastic. In some ways it was like just so beautiful. In some ways it was like, seductive or whatever. And she was saying, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's the space of beingness when you do it. And, some of us just forgot that we're human beings in this world, and we have to start shifting from human doings to human beings. And I think COVID has really helped with that, because so many people are getting in touch with that impulse of the soul. Now, I mentioned my shaman program. I'm curious, I saw like a lot of classes on your website. Do you have anything coming up like that's actually live? Live, not necessarily in person, but anything coming up that that you feel would be a value to the conversation, to give people another place where they can go to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, well, Kim and I just finished up our True North class, aligning with our True North. So we are going to be creating a new either series of workshops. We're still feeling it out. We don't have an answer yet, intuitively yet, which way it's going to go. So it will be coming up. So if people want to add on to our mailing list, I can certainly keep them posted once the next live opportunity shows up. That will be available to anyone. The other ones are, usually specific to a group that's already in play. Cool. But
I like that. Well, if it's not a spoiler, what is True North in this?
Sure. No. So True North is, you can still purchase it because it's evergreen now at this point, but we did walk through it live. So it's aligning with your True North. So it's, we have all this wisdom, and so many people consume wisdom, but then they don't know what to do with it. I know that was me for years. I read books, I read, but I didn't do anything with it because I didn't know how to put it into practice in my life. Just like you were asking all these wonderful questions. Well, how do you do this? What's a tool that you can use? And so we created True North to take this wisdom and help you continue, no matter where you're at on your journey. If you're brand new or you've been doing this work for a while, because you're going to access what you need in that moment. And so the first module is determining your compass. So what is your true north? And you will determine what your value is, your true north value, and create an intention. As you were talking about earlier about how you don't use goals. I am a huge intention fan. And that's actually another way they can sign up for the mailing list is I have a parenting with intention worksheet, and that'll automatically put you on the mailing list for stuff if someone's interested in that. So it's creating a parenting intention, but in here it's a true north intention. It's the same process. And then we go into looking at what things do you do in life? What is true to you? What are you doing that you really don't want to do, but you don't know how to say no to, but you've been saying yes to? So it's a process with that. Who are the people in your life? Are they filling you up or are they depleting you? And then the last module is what's your next step? What's your next path? What's getting in your way? What do you desire in life? So it really takes it down. There's PDFs for each section with worksheets. So you actually have practices to do. So you can use your head, right? Because so many of us are in our head. So it's balancing the head and heart, but then dropping into your heart. And so it's those invitations to get some clarity moving forward. And so then what follows True North will be these next steps, which we have a lot of ideas. It's just honing it into what is the right, I say in quotes, step for everyone.
And it sounds like that's really like a little path, a little compass to finding your authentic voice. Okay, exactly. That's why the authenticity coach, and that's why you're such a good fit for all the work that I do, because it's all about finding your unique, authentic voice in this world and being able to express it without being caught up with the fear, judgments of other people and all that kind of thing. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing with that. And one thing I wanted to give you one word from Quechua that really from that heart space that we have and from Peru, it's Munai, which means it's a combination of your will and love expressed. It's like your declaration of what you choose into the universe. And so they look at intention a little bit differently. Intention is one thing, but Munai is like it's the actual expression out in a way versus like the mind thing, and they work together.
Yes.
Work together very beautifully. But anyway, this has been so much fun having you on. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Love it. Love it. This has been an amazing conversation, and I love everything that you are bringing out into the world as well. I wrote another one down. I'm going to look at what you shared, just a couple things. So I just cannot wait to take in some more wisdom from you and from your guests as well.
Sounds good. And always, I'm sure we can create some other, another conversation around this, because it was, we had no problem really talking about it applicable to everyone, not just if you're a parent, but I'm certainly going to be going on the same, tell my wife, like, this one you really ought to watch. There's a lot of good stuff. And then we need to meet and make sure we're on the same page with everything. But thank you so much again for coming on, and we will catch everyone next time. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. And please make sure you help to spread the contagion of consciousness by sharing this video and subscribing to the channel, and just letting Google know, letting Facebook know that it's relevant to help it be spread to more people. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
As soon as I find the video, I never have the video ready.
I know how that goes. I've had that many times.
I have too many videos, but I found it now. Thank you, everyone. We will catch you next time.
Thanks for joining us today for the show. The Sonic Shaman is part of the Emergence of Being Contributor Network. Visit emergenceofbeing.com to learn about all the contributors and learn about our services and upcoming events. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. You can contribute to the show by supporting our efforts and sharing our content with those you care about and those who need it most.